The phone call came at 3:47 a.m., and I knew before I even answered that my perfectly orchestrated world was about to crumble. My sister's voice was barely a whisper, choked with tears I hadn't heard since we were children. "Amelia," she said, "I need you to come home. Everything you think you know about me is a lie." I stared at the ceiling of my cramped Chicago apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Brooke had always been the golden child, the one who did everything right while I stumbled through life making spectacular mistakes. She had the perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect career at Morrison & Associates law firm. She was supposed to be invincible. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back. But the line had already gone dead. 6 hours later, I was driving through the familiar streets of Millbrook, the small Ohio town I'd spent the last 5 years trying to forget. The autumn leaves crunched under my tires as I pulled into the circular driveway of Brooke's pristine colonial house. Everything looked exactly as it should. The manicured lawn, the seasonal decorations, the luxury cars parked side by side. But something felt different, like looking at a movie set where all the props were in place but the actors had forgotten their lines. I rang the doorbell 3 times before Brooke finally opened the door. The woman standing before me was a ghost of my sister. Her usually perfect blonde hair hung limp around her shoulders, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She was wearing the same clothes she'd probably slept in, wrinkled and stained with what looked like wine. "You came," she said, as if she hadn't been sure I would. "Of course I came. You sounded terrified." She stepped aside to let me in, and I was struck by the state of her usually immaculate home. Mail was scattered across the marble entryway table, dishes sat unwashed in the sink, and there were empty wine bottles lined up on the kitchen counter like soldiers preparing for battle. "Where's David?" I asked, referring to her husband of 8 years. Brooke's face crumpled. "Gone. He's been gone for 3 weeks. "Gone where? Business trip?" Gone, Amelia. He left me." She sank onto the white leather couch that had cost more than my car. "He found out about everything." I sat down beside her, my mind racing. "Found out about what?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "The money, the house, the job, all of it." "I don't understand." Brooke laughed, but it was a bitter sound devoid of any humor. "Of course you don't. I've been lying to everyone for so long. I almost started believing it myself." She looked at me with eyes that seemed to have aged years in the weeks since I'd last seen her. "I lost my job 8 months ago. Amelia. I was fired for falsifying billing records." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. You just got that promotion to partner track." That was a lie too. I've been pretending to go to work every day, sitting in coffee shops, driving around, anything to keep up the charade. I couldn't bear the thought of people knowing I'd failed. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Do you know how humiliating it is to be the person who was supposed to have it all figured out, only to realize you're a complete fraud?" I thought about all the times I'd felt inadequate compared to my sister, all the family dinners where our parents had praised her achievements while barely acknowledging my presence. The resentment I'd carried for years felt suddenly hollow and insignificant. "But how did you afford all this?" I gestured around the expensive room. "The house payments, the cars, the clothes. Credit cards, so many credit cards. I maxed them out and then got more. I sold my jewelry, my designer bags, anything I could convert to cash without David noticing. I even took out a loan against my engagement ring." She held up her left hand, and I could see the ring was gone, leaving just a pale band of skin where it used to be. "How much debt are we talking about?" 200,000, maybe more. I stopped counting after the first 100. I felt sick. "Brooke, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone?" She stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the perfect suburban street. "Because I was the successful one, remember? I was the one who had her life together. I was the one Mom and Dad were proud of. How could I admit that I was falling apart?" The truth of her words stung because I recognized myself in them. I'd spent so many years feeling like the family disappointment that I'd never considered how much pressure Brooke might have been under to maintain her image of perfection. "What happened at work?" I asked gently. She turned back to me, her eyes filling with tears again. "I was working on a case for a major client, and I was in over my head. The hours were insane, the pressure was crushing, and I was making mistakes. Small ones at first, but then bigger ones. I started padding my billable hours to meet the quotas, telling myself I deserved the credit for all the extra work I was doing at home, all the stress I was under. But everyone does that, don't they? Not to the extent I did. I was billing for hours I never worked, for research I never conducted, for meetings that never happened. When they audited the account, they found discrepancies going back almost a year. They fired me on the spot and threatened to report me to the State Bar Association. I tried to process this information. My sister, who had graduated summa cum laude from law school, who had been the golden child our entire lives, had been fired for essentially stealing from her clients. "Does Mom know?" I asked. Brooke shook her head. "No one knows except David, and now you. I've been intercepting the mail, screening calls, making excuses for why we couldn't visit for Sunday dinner. I told everyone I was working on a big case that required complete confidentiality." "What about David? How did he find out?" "The credit card statements. I'd been hiding them, but he found a stack of them in my car last month. When he confronted me, I tried to lie. But the numbers were too big to explain away. He was furious, not just about the money, but about the lying. He said he didn't even know who I was anymore." She sat back down next to me, and I could see how exhausted she was. "He gave me an ultimatum. Tell our family the truth, get help, and he'd stay and work through it with me. Or keep lying and lose him forever. And you chose to keep lying." I tried to tell them, I really did. But every time I started to, I'd see the disappointment in their faces, and I couldn't do it. I'd rather have them think I was too busy with my successful career to visit than know the truth. I thought about our parents, still living in the same house we'd grown up in, still bragging to their friends about their daughter, the lawyer. They had no idea their golden child was sitting in a house she couldn't afford, drowning in debt and lies. "So what's the plan now?" I asked. "I don't have a plan. I haven't had a plan for months. I've just been surviving day by day, hoping somehow it would all work out." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "What am I supposed to do, Amelia? How do I fix this?" For the first time in our relationship, my sister was asking me for help. It was a role reversal I'd never imagined, and I felt completely unprepared for it. "First, you need to talk to a lawyer about the debt situation, and you need to find a job, any job, to start generating income again." "Who's going to hire me? I was fired for fraud. Even if they don't report me to the bar, word gets around in legal circles. My reputation is destroyed." "Then maybe you need to consider a different career path." She looked at me like I'd suggested she start living on Mars. "I don't know how to do anything else. I've been a lawyer for 10 years. It's all I know." "You have a college degree. You're smart. You can learn new skills." "I'm 34 years old, Amelia. I can't start over from scratch." "Why not? I've started over a dozen times. It's not the end of the world." She laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You never had anything to lose." The comment stung, but I tried not to take it personally. She was lashing out because she was scared and desperate, not because she wanted to hurt me. "You're right," I said quietly. "I never had the pressure you had. But that also means I know how to survive when things fall apart. And things have fallen apart for me more times than I can count." She was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything is ruined?" "You take it one day at a time. You stop trying to control everything and just focus on what you can actually change. And you stop caring so much about what other people think." I can't stop caring what they think. These people are my friends, my colleagues, my family. Are they really your friends if they'll abandon you the moment you're not perfect? Are they really worth destroying your life to impress? She didn't answer, but I could see her considering the question. "You know what I realized about our family?" I continued. "They put you on a pedestal. But pedestals are lonely places. They love the image of who you were, not who you actually are. And the pressure to maintain that image has been killing you. So what do? You tell them the truth, all of it, and you deal with whatever happens next. I can't. I literally cannot face the disappointment in their eyes. Then you'll lose everything anyway. At least if you tell the truth, there's a chance some of it can be salvaged. We sat in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Brooke spoke again. Will you help me? Will you be there when I tell them? Of course. And will you help me figure out what to do next? I don't even know where to start. We'll figure it out together. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, Amelia. I'm sorry for all the years I made you feel like you weren't good enough. I'm sorry for being so judgmental about your choices. I thought I was better than you, but it turns out I was just better at hiding my failures. You weren't better at hiding them. You were just hiding different ones. She smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. When did you get so wise? Failure is a good teacher. I've had lots of practice. Over the next few hours, we worked together to assess the full scope of the damage. The numbers were worse than even Brooke had realized. Between the credit card debt, the mortgage she couldn't afford, and the personal loans she'd taken out, she was nearly $250,000 in debt. Her checking account was overdrawn, and she had about $50 in cash to her name. I think I need to declare bankruptcy, she said, staring at the spreadsheet we'd created. Maybe, but let's talk to a financial advisor first. There might be other options. Like what? Debt consolidation, negotiating with creditors, selling the house, and downsizing. It's not ideal, but it might be better than bankruptcy. She looked around the living room that had been her pride and joy. I love this house. I know. But it's just a house. It's not worth your mental health or your marriage. My marriage is already over. Is it? Have you talked to David since he left? He's staying at his brother's place. He won't return my calls. What if you told him you were ready to come clean about everything? What if you showed him you were serious about changing? It's too late for that. Maybe. But don't you think it's worth trying? She considered this. I wouldn't even know what to say to him. Start with the truth. Tell him you're sorry, tell him you're scared, and tell him you need help. What if he says no? Then at least you'll know you tried, and you can move forward without wondering what might have been. The next morning, I drove Brooke to meet with a bankruptcy attorney. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands and checking her phone obsessively, but she was taking action, which was more than she'd done in months. The attorney, a kind woman named Patricia Fields, listened to Brooke's story without judgment and explained her options. Bankruptcy was certainly one path, but there were alternatives worth exploring first. The most important thing, Patricia said, is to stop using credit cards immediately. Cut them up if you have to. And we need to contact your creditors right away to try to negotiate payment plans. What about the house? Brooke asked. Unless you can find a way to significantly increase your income very quickly, you'll probably need to sell it. The good news is that you have equity in it, so you won't walk away empty-handed. Brooke's face fell, but she nodded. I understand. The other thing you need to consider is whether you want to try to save your marriage. If David is willing to work with you, having a dual income will make everything much easier. He's not speaking to me right now. That could change if you demonstrate that you're serious about addressing the problems. After the meeting, we sat in my car in the parking lot. Brooke was staring at her phone, and I could see she was debating whether to call David. What's the worst that could happen? I asked. He could hang up on me. And then what? You'd be exactly where you are now. She took a deep breath and dialed his number. I watched her face change as the call connected. David, it's me. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to know that I'm getting help. I met with a bankruptcy attorney today, and I'm going to tell my family everything this weekend. She paused, listening to his response. I know I should have done this months ago. I know I've destroyed your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm not the same person who was lying to you. I'm trying to become someone better. She was quiet for a long time, and I could see tears streaming down her face. Okay, she said finally. I understand. Thank you for listening. She hung up and sat in silence for several minutes. What did he say? I asked. He said he's glad I'm finally getting help, but he needs more time to think about whether he can trust me again. He said he'd call me in a few days. That's not a no. It's not a yes, either. But it's not a no, I repeated. That's something. That evening, we drove to our parents' house for what Brooke called the conversation I've been dreading for 8 months. Our parents were thrilled to see both of us together, something that hadn't happened in years. This is such a nice surprise, our mother said, bustling around the kitchen to prepare dinner. I was just telling your father how much we miss having family dinners with both our girls. I watched Brooke's face as our mother spoke, and I could see the guilt and anxiety building. This was going to be one of the hardest conversations any of us had ever had. We made small talk through dinner, with our parents asking about Brooke's work and my latest attempts at freelance writing. Brooke deflected most of the questions, but I could see the strain in her face. Finally, as our mother was clearing the dishes, Brooke spoke up. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. Can we all sit down in the living room? Our parents exchanged glances, and I could see concern creeping into their expressions. Is everything okay, sweetheart? Our father asked. No, Brooke said simply. It's not. We all moved to the living room, and I positioned myself next to Brooke on the couch for moral support. She took a deep breath and began. I've been lying to you for months, about everything, about my job, my finances, my marriage, all of it. Our parents sat in stunned silence as Brooke told them the entire story. About losing her job, about the debt, about David leaving. She was crying by the time she finished. And our mother was crying too. Honey, our mother said, reaching out to take Brooke's hand. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I was ashamed. Because I was supposed to be the successful one. The one who had it all figured out. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing you. Our father, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, finally spoke. Brooke, you could never disappoint us enough to make us stop loving you. But I'm not the daughter you raised. I'm not the person you're proud of. You're exactly the daughter we raised, our mother said firmly. You made some mistakes, but that doesn't change who you are or how much we love you. I committed fraud, Mom. I destroyed my career and my marriage. I'm $250,000 in debt. And you're getting help, our father said. You're taking responsibility for your actions and working to fix them. That takes courage. I watched this exchange with amazement. I'd been so sure our parents would be devastated, that they'd be angry and disappointed. Instead, they were responding with love and support. What can we do to help? Our mother asked. I don't know. I'm going to have to sell the house and probably declare bankruptcy. I don't even know where I'm going to live. You can stay here, our father said immediately. Your old room is still exactly the same. I'm 34 years old. Dad, I can't move back home. Why not? Our mother asked. It's just temporary, until you get back on your feet. Because it's humiliating. More humiliating than losing everything because you're too proud to accept help, I interjected. Brooke looked at me, then at our parents. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to start over. You don't have to figure it out all at once, our mother said. We'll help you, step by step. What about your friends? What about the people at church? What are you going to tell them when they ask why I'm living at home again? We'll tell them the truth, our father said. That our daughter is going through a difficult time and we're supporting her. They'll judge me. They'll judge all of us. Let them, our mother said with a fierce expression I'd never seen before. Anyone who judges us for helping our daughter isn't worth our time. Over the next few weeks, I stayed in town to help Brooke navigate the process of dismantling her old life and building a new one. We met with real estate agents to discuss selling the house, contacted creditors to negotiate payment plans, and researched job opportunities in fields other than law. It was exhausting and emotionally draining work, but I watched my sister slowly transform from the desperate, broken woman I'd found that first night into someone who was beginning to resemble the person I'd always known she could be if she wasn't constantly performing perfection. I think I want to be a teacher, she told me one afternoon as we were going through boxes of her expensive clothes to donate. Really? What kind of teacher? Elementary school, maybe. I used to love working with kids before I got so caught up in the prestige of being a lawyer. You'd have to go back to school for that. I know, but I have time now. And our parents said I could stay with them as long as I need to. What about the money? I can get a teaching certificate through a fast-track program, and I can substitute teach while I'm getting certified. It won't pay much, but it'll be something. I smiled at her. You sound almost excited about it. I am. For the first time in years, I'm actually excited about something. She folded a designer blazer that had probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. I spent so much time trying to be impressive that I forgot to be happy. Being happy is underrated, I said. I think most people are too scared to try it. Were you happy? When you were bouncing from job to job, living in tiny apartments, never knowing what was coming next. I thought about it. Sometimes. Not all the time. But sometimes. I was definitely more honest than you were. I'm trying to learn how to be honest. It's harder than I thought it would be. It gets easier with practice. A few days later, David called. I was in the kitchen with Brooke when her phone rang, and I watched her face light up when she saw his name. Hi, she said, and I could hear the hope in her voice. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but I could tell from Brooke's responses that it was going well. She was nodding and smiling, and when she hung up, she looked happier than I'd seen her in weeks. He wants to meet for coffee, she said. He said he's been thinking about what I said, and he wants to talk about whether we can work things out. That's great news. I'm terrified. What if he's just meeting me to officially end things? What if he just wants closure? Then you'll deal with it, but what if he wants to try again? I don't know if I deserve another chance. That's not your decision to make. That's his decision. Your job is just to be honest about who you are now and what you want for the future. The coffee meeting went well. David was still hurt and angry, but he was also willing to consider the possibility of reconciliation. They agreed to try couples counseling, and David moved back home on a trial basis. It's not going to be easy, Brooke told me after his first night back. He doesn't trust me, and I don't blame him. But we're going to try. That's all you can do. I keep waiting for him to change his mind, to realize he's making a mistake. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But you can't live your life based on what might happen. You have to live it based on what is happening. A month later, I returned to Chicago, but I stayed in closer touch with Brooke than I had in years. She sent me regular updates on her progress. The house had sold. She'd started substitute teaching. She was making steady payments on her debt. And she and David were working through their issues in counseling. I never thought I'd say this, she told me during one of our phone calls. But I'm grateful for everything that happened. Not the lying and the debt and the pain I caused, but the fact that I finally had to face the truth about who I was. Who were you? Someone who was so afraid of being imperfect that I became someone I didn't even recognize. Someone who cared more about appearances than reality. And who are you now? I'm still figuring that out, but I'm someone who's learning to be honest, even when it's hard. Someone who's learning that it's okay to fail sometimes. Failure isn't the opposite of success, I said. It's part of success. I wish I'd learned that sooner. You learned it when you needed to. 6 months later, Brooke got her first full-time teaching position at an elementary school in a neighboring district. The salary was a fraction of what she'd made as a lawyer, but she was genuinely happy for the first time in years. I love it, she told me when I came to visit for her first day. The kids are amazing, and I feel like I'm actually making a difference. You were making a difference before, too. You just couldn't see it because you were so focused on the money and the prestige. I was making a difference for rich people who could afford my services. Now I'm making a difference for kids who really need someone to believe in them. Do you miss it? The old life? Sometimes I miss the security of a big paycheck, and I miss feeling important, but I don't miss the stress, and I don't miss the constant pressure to be perfect. Perfect is overrated anyway. You've been telling me that for months. I've been telling you that for years. You just weren't ready to hear it. We were standing in her new classroom, which was bright and cheerful and covered with artwork from her students. It was so different from the sterile elegance of her old office, but somehow it suited her better. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Were you ever jealous of me, of my old life?" I considered the question. "Yes, but not for the reasons you think." "What do you mean?" "I was jealous of how confident you seemed, how sure you were of yourself and your choices. I never realized how much of that confidence was actually fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear of being seen as a failure, fear of disappointing people, fear of not being good enough." I spent so much energy trying to avoid those fears that I created exactly the situation I was trying to prevent. That's usually how it works. What about now? Are you still jealous? I looked around the classroom, at my sister who was glowing with genuine happiness despite earning a third of her previous salary and living in a modest apartment instead of a mansion. "No," I said honestly. "Now I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For destroying my life and having to start over." "For having the courage to start over." "For choosing authenticity over appearance." "For being brave enough to be imperfect." She smiled, and I could see that she was finally beginning to believe it herself. "You know what's funny?" she said. "I spent so many years thinking you were the family failure, but you were actually the brave one. You were the one who was living honestly, even when it was hard. We were both doing the best we could with what we knew at the time." "I guess so. But I'm glad we both know better now." A year later, Brooke and David renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony in our parents' backyard. Instead of the elaborate affair they'd had the first time, it was simple and intimate, with just family and close friends. "I want to marry the person you actually are," David said in his vows, "not the person you thought I wanted you to be." "I promise to be honest with you," Brooke said through tears, "even when the truth is ugly or embarrassing or imperfect." I stood beside her as her maid of honor, watching my sister make a commitment not just to her husband, but to herself. She was different now, more relaxed, more genuine, more present. She laughed more easily and worried less about what other people thought. "Thank you," she said to me during the reception. "For what?" "For showing me that it's possible to fail and still be loved. For teaching me that perfection is just another word for loneliness." "You taught me some things too," I said. "Like what?" "That success isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up when you do." "I like that." "Good, because I have a feeling we're both going to need to remember it." She laughed. "Probably. But at least now I know I don't have to pretend to be perfect while I'm figuring things out." "Nobody's perfect, Brooke. That's what makes us human." "I'm still learning that lesson." "We all are. The trick is to be gentle with yourself while you're learning." As I watched my sister dance with her husband, surrounded by people who loved her for who she really was, rather than who she'd pretended to be, I realized that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be real. The perfect life she'd built had been a beautiful lie, but the imperfect life she was building now was a beautiful truth. And truth, I'd learned, was always more beautiful than perfection, even when it was messier, scarier, and harder to maintain. In the end, that's what family is for, not to witness our perfection, but to love us through our imperfections, to catch us when we fall, and to celebrate with us when we find the courage to get back up and try again.